Hello, everyone. Welcome to Birds Explored. So we are going to make, second round of the woodpeckers. So because the first round has some problems, voice problems. So we decided to make it again, and we invited John Williams one more time, and he accepted, and he's gonna be here soon. So today we are, as I said before, we are talking about again the woodpeckers. So it was very nice actually episode, but we are gonna make it again. So Peter, where's Peter? Hello,
Hello, Utku.
welcome back. So we have another round for woodpeckers.
Yeah, we had some technical difficulties with the last one, so
Right.
we wanted to make sure that people were able to hear the information we had about this family of birds.
Yes. So thank you very much for your time once again.
Sure.
Um, I have the presentation that we used last time, so I'm gonna using it again.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are. Family Pisidae. So we are talking about 240 species in total, which is very interesting, like others, like pigeon and doves, like the other groups, but interesting, right?
Oh
Would you
yeah,
like to start?
yeah. So with about 240 species found worldwide, as always, there's going to be a lot of diversity. You know, occasionally you'll get a bird that's a monotypic species, where it's found around the world, but it's pretty much the same in size and color and etc. But then there are these birds like woodpeckers where you've got a lot of diversity in size and coloration and habitat, and there's a lot of species that you could spend days looking at one or two of them. Yeah,
Yeah, you said the same size, but I'm just thinking last time we probably didn't talk about this. Wryneck.
yeah, wrynecks in there. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, the wryneck is part of the woodpeckers, and it is also interesting bird.
Oh
So it
sure.
usually lives on the ground.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, within the family, you've got all these interesting modifications on the, uh, the structure of the bill and the plumage and uh, habitat differences, and yeah, a lot to look at.
and I'm thinking about the camouflage for the wryneck, so which is really, interesting.
Yeah,
So
they look.
we can't definitely see them on the ground. So it's really the camouflage ability is very nice.
Yeah, they look like a little piece of dried leaf.
Yes,
Hmm.
that's completely correct. Okay, so here's the distribution of Pisidae. Again, very widespread, except the north part of Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa is wide distribution for different species. Same for the Palearctic region and also North America and South America has lots of different things.
Yeah, it's quite a distribution. So I guess
Right.
in northern Africa, you've got a lot of desert. Very difficult for them to survive there, and way up north where it's too cold. Although they make it pretty far north on both the North American continent and the Eurasian continent.
Peter, when we look at the map, so what's happening in Australia and also Madagascar?
Well, Australia, the middle of Australia, is pretty inhospitable to a lot of animals. Very, very intense temperature changes and not much around. Um, and so you often find birds in higher concentrations along the coast in Australia. But even here, we see that there doesn't seem to be any woodpecker species there.
Yes.
Yeah, so they seem to be absent from islands to more or less. Look at Madagascar and look at New Guinea and the Pacific South Seas. Not many. It doesn't look like there's any there.
So all these big islands has interesting stuff. So and
Hmm.
also same for the Madagascar.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. No endemic woodpeckers.
Right.
Good.
Okay.
Some we could talk a little bit about some of the anatomy, some of the structures on the woodpeckers, this family.
Yes,
So,
yes, please.
yeah, let's start with the upper left there. That's the head of a pileated woodpecker, and you can't see the tip of the bill, but you can see that the bill is rather strong looking, stout. And the tip of the bill, if you could see it, actually is not really pointy. It's more like a chisel shape. It's kind of flattened and sort of just ends in this kind of chisel shape. And of course, the woodpeckers use that to bore into the bark of trees to find insect prey that's in there. As you said, some woodpecker species like the wryneck and the flickers in North America, they have more pointy bills because they tend to eat ants and insects on the ground. You'll see them hopping around on the ground, getting insects on the ground, although they will bore into the trees as well. Um, on the upper right, here's a woodpecker. You can see it clinging to the side of a tree, using its bill to probe the bark, to burrow into the bark, looking for insect prey. And you can see the foot of that woodpecker there too. On the top, it's clinging to the tree. On the bottom right, you can see the structure of the foot. Woodpeckers have a zygodactyl arrangement of the toes. They have two toes facing forward, two toes facing back. It's different from a lot of other birds, which usually have three facing forward and one facing back. And you can see that the nails are rather sharp on woodpeckers, remind me a little bit of raptors. And of course, that's going to allow them to be able to cling onto the tree easily while they're drilling into the bark with their bill. They sort of lean back on their tail, which is kind of stiff. Feathers are stiff. And as they lean back, they're able to hammer into the trees with their bill. And you got to wonder, how does their skull take all of this abuse? They're banging their heads against a tree, basically. Well, woodpeckers' skulls are quite robust. They sort of have a double layer of bone with some cushioning in there. And if you look on the lower left of the slide, you see another pileated woodpecker that has its tongue extended. And you can see the tongue of the woodpecker is extremely long. And in that picture is an illustration of where the bird's tongue is when it's in its mouth. You got to put that tongue somewhere. And if you look in at the picture there of the skull, when the tongue is brought into the mouth, it actually uh, sits inside these little segments of cartilaginous material, um, and it it actually comes all the way back and around the back of the bird's skull, and inserts into the nostril, one of the nostrils of the woodpecker's the nose, the nostrils, the nares, and so that's where the tongue is when it's not being used. But if you have a live woodpecker or you have a photo like this, you can see that the tongue extends way, way out from the tip of the bill. In addition to that, the tip of the tongue is pointy like a little spear, and it's
Mhm.
got these backward facing barbs on it so that when an insect is captured, pierced by the tongue, it can't get away. Another adaptation that you can't see on these pictures are the large salivary glands of woodpeckers. They have these big, big salivary glands um, that are associated with the region of the base of the tongue there. And there's a lot of saliva that's produced when they're working on the tree, which helps to sort of smooth the tongue, kind of gives it some kind of a lubricant as it's being used so that it doesn't get dry and get stuck in the tree. So all kinds of adaptations in the feet and the bill of these woodpeckers, and it's all sort of evolved to allow them to be able to to do this very difficult work of burrowing into trees for their insect prey.
Okay, okay, thank you so much. And next slides. You remember this?
Yeah, this is bird watchers, birders, people who like to go out and identify birds. Sometimes you just identify a bird, but it's just a silhouette. It's against the sun, and you just see sort of a black image. And so sometimes birders will use the uh, the pattern of flight to identify the silhouette of a bird. And woodpeckers are one group of birds that have what's called an undulating flight. So they kind of they fly up and then they kind of dip down. They go up a little bit more. They dip down again, up and down and up and down. You can see the dotted line shows sort of the pattern of the woodpecker's flight. Now, when we talk to John a little later on, he might mention, I don't know if he will, he's listening now, so he's going to talk about the ivory-billed woodpecker, and he might suggest that the undulating flight of the woodpecker family is not as obvious in the ivory-billed woodpecker, and you know, these sorts of things, field marks. And this is some information, some illustrations about the breeding biology of woodpeckers. For the most part, they nest in holes in trees. Sometimes they'll use holes that are already there and they'll modify them with their bill. Sometimes they'll excavate a hole from a tree or in a tree that's useful for nesting. And on the upper right, you can see 4 woodpecker eggs in a nest. And you'll notice that the eggs are white. There's no pattern on them. There's no markings, no stripes, no splotches, no dark coloration. There's no real camouflage. And the
So
thing,
this is valid for the all species. Every species in woodpeckers
I,
has
be,
white.
I believe it is. I could be wrong, but I believe that's so. And the thinking is that since the eggs are inside of a cavity, there's no real
Mhm.
need to select for eggs with camouflage pattern on it. We see this in owls too that nest in holes in trees. Um, and so they're also just sort of egg shaped too. They don't need to be any sort of particularly long shape. You know, some birds lay eggs on a cliff and they have very long pointy eggs, so they kind of spin in a circle rather than falling off the cliff, but it's not necessary in the woodpeckers. Um, on the lower right, we see a little downy woodpecker. There's a nestling in there sticking its beak out, waiting for its parent to feed it. Parent brings insect prey back and puts it in the mouths of the babies. There's probably more than one in there. Sometimes you'll see a woodpecker nest with young in it. There'll be 3 or 4 of them sticking their head out of the hole, getting their parents' attention. Here you see one. In the middle of this slide, we see this the green woodpecker with really sort of a heavy bill. This is one that's very comfortable on the ground, more terrestrial than some of the others. The one on the lower left is a red-headed woodpecker inside of what looks like an old cavity of a tree. You see how that growth has come back on the outside of that cavity. So that's obviously not a fresh hole in a tree. It's not a fresh tree cavity. And then upper left is the photo we started with. I guess this is a fledgling woodpecker. Not sure what species it is. It could be a downy or a hairy woodpecker, but you can see the little pin feathers growing on its throat and on the top of its head. It's not fully feathered yet, but yeah. So a couple of illustrations of woodpeckers at home there. And some more.
So this is the
Yeah,
woodpeckers of the world. There are lots of diversity there.
yeah. So we like this slide here because of the patterns, different plumage patterns, different sizes. Um, you know, they're all woodpeckers. They all have those characteristics that I just mentioned, but then there's modifications on that theme. And surrounding the poster with all of those species on it are a couple of photos of different species. I don't know what they are. I know they're all woodpeckers, but you know, just some diversity there, showing some of the larger woodpeckers. The one on the upper left looks a little bit like a wryneck, but I don't think it is. It's sort of has the
No,
same
it's not.
sort,
Yeah,
yeah, has the same sort of head though, right? It looks a little
that's true,
bit,
but
yeah,
it's not a rhino.
yeah, looks a little bit like similar.
So there are
So
some North American stuff.
yeah, so let's sort of introduce what John's going to talk about by talking about this slide. So on the left, Lower left is a photograph of a pileated woodpecker. It's a large black and white woodpecker. And if you look at the range map on top of it, above it, it's got a very wide distribution. Bird of the woods. Um, they're about crow. They're about the size of a crow, um, and very common in all of its range. It's pretty common. If you're walking around the woods, you're likely to see a pileated woodpecker in the spring. They're also kind of noisy, and they dig they dig out big holes in trees looking for their prey. They like to eat big beetle larvae and large insects like that are in the tree, and they produce what are called workings, which are these big cavitations in the tree that they've dug out with their beak, and the bottom of the cavitation has these big wood chips on it. It looks like somebody's been working with a chainsaw there. It's amazing to see these, and they're quite, like I said, quite common. Now, on the right side of this screen is a color enhanced black and white photo of an ivory-billed woodpecker. And the ivory-billed woodpecker is somewhat larger, I think, than the pileated woodpecker. But as you can see, there's some similarities. Red on the head, the shape is kind of the same. There's some white on the neck. It's a larger woodpecker, of course. It's got a light-colored bill, and it's got a lot more white on the um, dorsal side of the wings. And if you look at the slide in the middle of the screen, you can see the distribution of the ivory-billed woodpecker. It's a lot more restricted to the southern parts of the United States than the pileated woodpecker. But the pileated woodpecker does occur where the ivory-billed woodpecker used to occur or may still occur. So the ivory-billed woodpecker was known to John James Audubon and Alexander Wilson and people who lived in the South, in some of the swamps in Arkansas and Florida. Native Americans were aware of it. And then it began to get increasingly rare. There was a lot of habitat loss, and the bird had a large home territory, and they started to become more and more rare. And in the 1940s, the ivory-billed woodpecker was still around. People had seen it. Some ornithologists had seen it, and it became less and less common because of deforestation and human activity. And the bird was seen sporadically from the 1940s into the into the next few decades, and then was pretty much declared extinct. We figured it was gone. Nobody had seen it in a long time, and the bird was sort of just relegated to the list of North American bird species that is gone. And then in 2004, 2005, a couple of ornithologists, a couple of people who were very good at identifying birds, Tim Gallagher and Bobby Harrison in Arkansas, said that they had a sighting of an ivory-billed woodpecker. And it was all very exciting. They didn't take a picture, but they made sketches of the bird that they saw, and that started a very earnest search for possible extant ivory-billed woodpeckers. And some people are convinced that the bird is still there. Some people are convinced that the bird is gone. My personal feeling, I'm still agnostic. I see some film that people have taken, and I listen to some recordings of so-called vocalizations, and I'm not sure. So I hope the bird is still there, but I'm not certain either way yet. But our guest, John Williams, he's an old friend of mine. We met back in the 1980s, early 1980s. John has been one of these people who has been very interested in the rediscovery, so-called, of the ivory-billed woodpecker, and he's been keeping abreast of the information that's been coming out. He's made a couple of trips down to the southeastern part of the U.S. to see if he could find it. And I'm going to just let him talk about his interest and his quest to find out if the ivory-billed does in fact continue to survive down there.
So
And this is another illustration. Yeah, John could explain more about this. So you see the pileated and the ivory-billed are somewhat similar looking. As I mentioned, the ivory-billed is larger, has more white in the trailing edge and the upper surface of the wing. Lighter bill, pileated smaller, a little less white in the wings. And then there's a little red-headed woodpecker there to illustrate the white on the wings. The red-headed woodpecker occurs where the ivory-bill occurs as well in Florida, but it's much, much smaller, and the whole head is red. And, it's just sort of for comparative purposes. I don't think most people would mistake a red-headed woodpecker for an ivory-billed woodpecker. But we could talk to John about that. And these are old photos, black and white photos of some of the last ivory-bills that were seen in a place called the Singer Tract. And there's an immature bird, a fledgling on this guy's arm on the right, and on the left are the adults at the nest. This is from a PhD thesis by James Tanner. He did his thesis on these ivory-bills some time ago. A lot of the information that we have about the ivory-bill comes from Tanner's thesis. And this is Bobby Harrison on the left and Tim Gallagher on the right, who reported a sighting of the ivory-bill in 2004, I believe.
Okay. So we are right now end of the presentation. I'm gonna take this one out. Thanks, Peter. It's great.
Yep.
I'm gonna take John to the studio, then we can talk more about Ivory-billed Woodpecker.
Hey, you guys.
There he is. There's Woody Woodpecker. Yeah.
Oh, believe me, I'm going to be serious. I just wanted to show the viewing audience, first of all, how large this bird is. This is a life-size model we used for some camera work. And here's a wing. Here's the body. Here's the length of the other wing. And this is a semi-accurate view of what this bird looks like.
It's big.
Do they exist? They exist. They were not made extinct, luckily. In 2010, long after I was assisted in some ornithological knowledge by Peter in the 1980s, in 2010, my son and I were in Florida, and we were birding, and I saw what I thought was a loon. However, when I got back to my book, I used this book, very good book, Arthur Singer. I found that it may have been an ivory-billed woodpecker, so I started this interest in this species. I do have it checked off in my book. I have a little check mark there. I believe I've seen it possibly 4 times, once in Florida, got a good long look at 550 feet away, twice in Louisiana, 3 times in Louisiana as part of an expedition. But now I basically am at my laptop on Long Island, New York, and I consult with a lot of efforts. People send me audio and video. And with a science background, I'm able to be objective. I've seen evidence that isn't ivory-bill. I've also seen a good amount of evidence that is pretty clearly ivory-bill, both acoustic at the spectrogram level and with video of parts of the anatomy, including individual feathers, behavior that's like a known video for the imperial woodpecker and other camphophilids. So luckily this bird does exist. It's just a matter of proving it. It's also a story that has many twists and turns with famous birders wanting to get there first, with special interests denying evidence that's as plain as the nose on your face, etc. Yeah.
No,
What's that, Peter?
yeah, that's an interesting story. So you but you've got boots on the ground. You've been in the field looking for the bird, and as you say, you do have a science background. You
That's what
taught
they tell
biology.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You've taught biology for many years, right? And science.
Yeah, I have an
And
undergrad in marine bio. I'm trained by National Marine Fisheries for marine mammal, and marine bird observing.
right, right. And I've known you for a long time. You're a naturalist. You're out there actually doing stuff. So it's always been sort of interesting to me. So let me ask you this. I've seen a lot of pileated woodpeckers,
Right.
obviously, and I've been in situations not in the southeast, but where I'm just sitting out there and I'm observing, and happen to be in some kind of a swampy area in the north,
Mm-hmm.
and pileated flies by. There's nests in the area. I've seen quite a few of them, and there's a little glimmer of white, and there's this flight through the trees, and for me, I could almost imagine thinking, well, gee, that looks like an ivory-bill maybe down, if I were down south, and I just sort of got this glimpse and this flashes of white, and just this big woodpecker, and I've imagined that. So you having actually been out there, what makes it different than a pileated in the field, kind of just a view like that?
Quite a number of things are different about this bird. It's not a lot bigger in terms of inches of length. I think the difference is something like 18 inches for the pileated, 20 inches for the ivory-billed. But the ivory-billed is almost twice as massive.
Yeah.
So in other words, you're a more massive guy than I am. If we stood next to each other, somebody took a silhouette, they could tell it's you, they could tell it's me, that I'm thin.
Right.
For example, the flight is different. The flight has been described by many who have observed the birds as duck-like, less than the swooping woodpecker, although they do have these grand swoops. But when they're going somewhere, it is quite duck-like. And people have described this. People have even got video of it. I think Bobby Harrison revealed a video 2 years ago. I work with a group called Mission Ivory-bill. So if any of the viewers want to go and check what I'm saying, go to Facebook, go to Mission Ivory-bill. You will see links to these presentations on Zoom.
Yeah, we can link them here too, Utku.
Yeah. Project Principalis, that used to be Project Coyote, has done some really good work with Steve Latta of the National Aviary, and they've got some video posted. They have a paper, I think it's in the journal Ecology and Evolution, starts with multiple lines of evidence. They've got some drone footage. They've got some time-lapse footage. You can see a white saddle. The white saddle on the bird when its wings are folded are a clear difference from the pileated. They don't have that.
Right.
There are many differences. The vocalizations are quite different. And I did some work on that recently. I found there was a pattern that shows these birds like to make these Kent-like sounds around 587 hertz. Many dedicated expeditions have recorded these sounds, and they center around 587 with a data set of 150 recordings.
Now that would be different than something like nuthatches and these kinds of birds, because I've often heard that there's similarities in the sounds. But
if you look at they are quite different. If you look at the spectrograms, I think that birders would tend to earbird. Ornithologists would want to have spectrograms of these different sounds.
Right.
If you look at the spectrograms for what we think are ivory-bills compared to the different nuthatches, red-breasted, white-breasted, the red and white-breasted nuthatches, they have lines that are dissonant. They're not octave related. They're not even harmonic related. They're dissonant. The ones we think are ivory-bills never show that. if you look at the blue jay, I just did some work for Chuck Hunter of U.S. Fish and Wildlife. He sent what he thought was the best blue jay Kent. It's still clearly different. It's shorter. The bands on the spectrogram are more blocky. They're less linear. So you can basically show that all these focused ivory-billed expeditions, they've recorded something that agrees. It's different than any known bird, and it somewhat matches with the recordings Cornell got in 1936, I think. Yeah. The evidence is strong with this.
Yeah, well, that's significant. If it's going to be different on the spectrographs, then
let me just check what Ivan says from it. Ivan the Ivory-bill.
Ivan,
we're still around, guys.
Oh, well, that proves it. There you go.
Sorry, no, actually, this is quite. I was a teacher,
important.
so you got to throw some.
Yeah. Utku, do you have any comments about what was just discussed there? Can't hear you. Utku.
You got to turn your mic up, Utku.
Sorry.
There you go.
I don't have any specific comments, but yeah, it's interesting. So everybody believes it's gone, it's extinct, but maybe it's still around. So
well, not everybody, but I do want to.
Not everybody, most of the people.
Yeah,
probably.
yeah. I do want to mention something. Last time we did this, we talked a little bit about the subspecies, the Cuban ivory-bill, and
Right.
It was Lester Short and company, Lester from the American Museum of Natural History, who in the 1980s did see the Cuban ivory-bill in some of the highlands there. It's a subspecies, Campephalus principalis bairdi, and I think there's only 2 subspecies, but I think that hasn't been seen since then either. It's hard to get information from Cuba sometimes. I don't know if the bird is still there, but I think I recall that after Lester had left, and there wasn't any more information forthcoming after that, but it was there in the 80s. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, but there are lots of bird watchers in North America. So, is there any really, concrete evidence that?
Well,
we can
Utku, I
talk
could
about?
comment on that. The birders typically do not go into areas where the ivory-bill is. We think that the ivory-bill has had an extreme population decrease, mainly from hunting and also from habitat loss, but hunting has stopped. The habitat is increasing. So the obvious thing is that the numbers are rebounding. They're underneath their carrying capacity, but they are not numerous. So you guys know about the black rail, right?
Mm-hmm.
How difficult it is to see this bird.
Yeah, Utku might not. It's north.
No.
Well, it's funny you mention it because I saw one last. Yeah, my one and only black rail. I saw my first one. I'm 65 years old. I saw it last spring. I'm not going to say where, and I thought it was a mouse. I was walking down a trail in a salt marsh, and this thing comes scurrying out from the left side of the Phragmites. I'm
Wow.
like, oh, mouse. But then I'm looking, and it's this little black bird with a red eye, and it disappears into the other side. So, it's a black rail. I mean, it's interesting, right? You've never seen one before, but you know what it is when you see it, right? And I came to work, and I was talking to George Barraclough, one of the curators here. And I said, I saw a black rail, my only black rail. And he said to me that Bob Dickerman, another ornithologist from some years ago, had come in and said, I saw a black rail, and I thought it was a mouse. So
Really?
it looks like a mouse. It's a little thing, Yeah. Anyway,
I'd love to see one. I don't expect to ever see one. They're a very, very difficult bird to get on your life list.
But they're
the
there.
ivory-bill is probably 1,000 times more difficult, because it would be like trying to find a black rail, but having to travel to 1,000 salt marshes
Right,
to
right.
even get the chance of being able to find the black rail, which is secretive. The ivory-bill can move. It has a flight initiation distance of maybe 80 yards, 100 meters roughly. They will react and move away from a human-like object at that distance, and they are fast. So it just checks off all the boxes for a birder not to see it. We think a hunter's going to get it, or somebody with a head cam that's always on, focused at about that distance, and just a random quick sighting.
You mentioned something a minute ago I wanted to ask you about. You said something about hunting. So do you mean that the ivory-bill itself was hunted, or that people hunting in the area disturbed it? And because what's the motivation for hunting ivory-billed woodpeckers? I mean,
well, I don't know. This book, I would recommend this book by Chris Haney for that information. This here's Tanner's.
Right.
Tanner's is and was the Bible. Chris Haney's approach is that it's an encyclopedia of information like that, saying about the hunting and the pressures. And I don't think it was exactly women's hats like the egrets were.
Right.
But there was a focused hunting. You know what, Peter? Actually, it was for, sorry to say this, it was for museum collections.
Well, yeah. No, don't be sorry. We have them. Yeah. You're welcome.
As the bird became more rare, people were trying to record it more. So
of course, yeah, it happens.
You had that, you had that bottleneck.
Right.
However,
but there must have been some hunting. There must have been some hunting prior to collecting, is what I'm getting at. And was the bird hunted by indigenous people?
Yes. Yeah, I believe so. If you go to, say, the year 1900, every decade since then, there have been 12 decades since then, there's been recordings of the ivory-billed woodpecker extant.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Everyone.
Okay.
So Utku, what do you think about habitat? I mean, this bird, this is a bird of the big swamps, the big southeastern North American swamplands. Because maybe John could talk a little bit about what we thought the bird required, right? Old growth, big mature trees. But is that a necessity for the continuation of the bird?
Well, Utku, I would ask you. You're a professional ornithologist. I know that you don't specialize in this species. What have you heard about this bird? I'm curious.
Well, I only know for the ivory-billed woodpecker, I only know that they are extinct. So yeah, that's all I can say. And also, my specialty is the museum specimens. I worked on the museum specimens to get the DNA and try to understand genetic differences between populations using only museum ancient specimens. So I'm always thinking to do something for the ivory-billed woodpecker, but they are extinct and the collection is very important. So it's not easy to cut any topaz, getting any material from the skins. But this is my interest. But also I want to say, when we look at the biodiversity crisis, all these extinction events, so the main reason is habitat destruction for animals. Human being doing some habitat destruction and hunting. So I think the first thing, habitat destruction. So they really affect the bird population and all animal population actually, and they are going to be extinct. So behind the scene, why ivory-billed woodpecker is extinct? Because of the hunting, because of the habitat destruction. I don't know much about this. So I'm also thinking, and I'm also curious about this question.
Well, what I could say
Do you
is
have any
that
idea?
I'm sorry.
Do you have any idea about this?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm not the one who has written about this. When I first started studying the ivory-bill, I was reading that it was a bird of the old growth forest and swamps. It needed very mature trees that are largely gone.
Mm.
But that's been challenged. Mark Michaels of Project Principalis has written about it. I think he's not the only one who's realizing these birds are adaptable, and they will show up in orchards next to largely wild areas. They'll show up at the edge of suburbia. They'll show up in rural farmland areas with good evidence of them being there, with video of them and audio being there, because what they really are looking for are high caloric beetle larvae. There's been some suggestions they react to cicada blooms, some firsthand, nothing really documented, but certainly they're documented to want to have beetle larvae, especially during their feeding season for their young. That seems to be really the only constraint. People have talked about them being constrained by great horned owl territories, so they have like an edge effect with them. There's some kind of a northern effect that keeps them much farther south than pileatids, which I couldn't even speculate on. But they apparently don't just need, they are not tied to old growth bottomlands, so it makes it even more difficult to find them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask if you know anything about the home ranges of breeding pairs, because larger birds usually have larger home ranges, and so there isn't a large concentration in a relatively small space.
Is it true for woodpeckers?
Well, this one in particular.
Yeah.
So I can answer the question for the picoid. Downies and hairies. I mean, I could collect a pair of hairy woodpeckers, and then in 10 minutes there's another pair there. I mean, there's that sort of thing. So I don't expect that's what happens with something like an ivory-bill.
Well, there's a lot of speculation with that. Tanner was saying that their home range in the winter months when they're breeding and fledging is something like 4 to 6 miles linear, maybe 30 square miles or so. However, they can have extended family units. They've been sighted with 4 or 5 or 6 together. The fledgling stays with them once it's starting to fly. It stays with them sometimes for a number of years. They may have an inbreeding component or some kind of a low genetic diversity component that allows them to survive anyway. They're not the only bird species that can model that. So there's just so much that's not known.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just so I'm getting the impression that there's information, or you have information at least, that the bird isn't as stenophagic or what can I say? It has the ability to adapt more than we thought it might have. So it's able to maybe use more food resources than just one kind of beetle and this and that. And it could be.
Well, yeah, they're clearly omnivores. Tanner showed they'll eat vegetative material. Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm getting at is then why isn't it the case where it's relatively easy to go in and in the proper habitat they would be kind of more common? I don't.
No.
Yeah.
They're just very rare and very skittish, and that's pretty much why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we talked last time about maybe if you can't see the entire bird all the time, we were talking about DNA. Everybody talks about DNA, and I had mentioned to you environmental DNA at one point.
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Well, I looked into that because people were talking about it, and I talked with a specialist from Japan, and what I came away with and remembering is if we were to collect from a roost hole some environmental DNA, we couldn't really show if it was a year old or 40 years old, which
now,
makes it very difficult.
Well, Uka, do you think, does that sound right to you? Are you able? It seems to me newer DNA is going to be less broken up. You're going to
Yes,
have
that's
whole
true.
sequences, but the older stuff's going to be more broken up. So why wouldn't you be able to tell? I'm asking Utku as a genetics guy and lab genetics guy. What do you think about that? I mean, my assumption would be that old stuff would be split up and new stuff would be more intact. I mean, maybe
That's
you
true.
would.
In terms of the environmental DNA,
Yeah.
so the environmental DNA, important tool to understand the faunistic elements in a specific environment, specific habitat. But I think the DNA is getting degraded. It's a fresh DNA, but because of the other factors like a sun, like you know, different chemicals and the environmental conditions, DNA getting degraded. So it's hard to understand. But if we believe something exists in a specific habitat and we can get some good sampling in terms of the environmental DNA, we can definitely find something belong to the mystic species. So I don't think it's gonna be it shouldn't be that hard. So the people is using it and people getting the lots of different species names. I mean, they can take a little bit water from the lake, one of the lake, and they can understand how many duck or waterfall using that place. So this technique is getting really nicer and nicer because of this technology. So I don't think the degraded DNA or the fresh DNA is important for the environmental DNA stuff.
Well, yeah. And in one sense, if you get ivory-billed DNA, okay, old, new, there's ivory-billed DNA. But my suggestion is, or my question is, aren't there levels of degradation? In other words, if an ivory-bill took a shit last week, and there's some DNA in there from the intestinal tract, right?
Right.
That DNA is going to be in better shape than that of one that was there 40 years ago.
Oh, that's true. I couldn't understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I mean, what?
DNA is getting. I don't know. They
So
probably. Yeah.
right. So John, might go back to you and this information you got. You said from Japan. I
Mhm.
mean, yeah. I mean, I understand that you know there's older DNA and newer DNA, but why was this contact saying you couldn't tell the difference between new and old DNA? Now that I think about it, it sounds a little weird.
I don't know. I don't know much about it. I'm just
Yeah.
relaying what
Yeah.
basically I
Sure.
was
Yeah.
told. Well, Utku, I have a question for you. I'm
Yes.
working with a woman. I'm working with a woman, Rachel Webster. I don't think she'd mind me saying her name, who is pursuing a doctorate studying the ivory bill. So we just spoke this morning. She thinks she has these birds in Louisiana, and she thinks that they are centered around a stream. If I said to her, "Well, I spoke with you, and she was able to obtain a water sample and send it to you," do you think you could isolate something that we could call ivory-billed?
Oh, yes, definitely. So we know, I think, in GenBank, there are some available DNA sequences for Ivory-billed Woodpecker.
Yeah.
Really?
So if we can get any samples from the lake or from the different specific habitats that people thinks Ivory-billed Woodpecker is extinct there, then we can make some experiments. So we can develop specific primers for the specific regions. I mean, especially for mitochondrial DNA. So the Ivory-billed Woodpecker mitochondrial DNA is completely different than the other organisms. Well, not only the birds, but the other organisms. So when we get the specific primers for the bird DNA and specific primers for especially the Ivory-billed Woodpecker DNA, then we can probably get some clue using these primers, and we can speculate Ivory-billed Woodpecker over there or not. So I think the environmental DNA technology gives us this opportunity.
Now, who would do it, Utku?
In Turkey, I have a couple of friends working on environmental DNA, but in United States, I don't know how many people working in environmental DNA, but people using it, I don't know the specific person. In
Because
Turkey, yeah,
we're not dealing with any restriction on using a skin then, so I don't there shouldn't be any issue with
right,
it would just be getting somebody to do it. I don't care
yes,
if it's in Turkey or anywhere else. Doesn't
right.
matter. Just do it somewhere.
Do you happen to know how much water would be needed for that?
So I don't know how much water do we need, but I think for a, I mean, for a sampling, we should get different part of the water. We should get at least maybe 10 or 20 different sampling.
Okay.
I think the amount of water is not really important, but the sampling points in a lake is important. So we shouldn't get only the one sample. We should get probably 10 or 20 different samples from different places of the lake.
Yeah. Are you
Well,
talking?
okay.
What's up, Peter?
Yeah, well, we're okay. So we're talking water. So this person who's doing the research, does she claim to see birds?
Yeah, she's got some good video that I'm hoping to measure distance for. I
Okay,
sent her a
so
range fund. Yeah,
right.
and
So because
audio.
so my suggestion there is that while we can do the water, look, if she's seeing birds, then they're defecating and they might be in a cavity somewhere. So it would be of in extreme importance for her to maybe
Another
get
good
material from there. Yeah.
Another good thing I can mention with the Ivory-billed community is we're somewhat connected. For example, this woman, Rachel, she knows Guy Leno and David Luneau, who were involved in the 2004 search.
Right.
She knows Mark Michaels. She knows Matt Cortman. She's talked with Mike Collins. I've worked with these guys. So we share information, which is how science should be. There are some competitive other people. This could be good with saying to her, just get some water, and we'll go from there. Yeah.
Well, it's worth a try. I mean,
Yeah.
I would imagine that they'd have.
Definitely worth a try. So, but the problem, so we might get some contamination problem, but I think it can be solvable. I mean, it's not really the big problem. So I think if you know the specific place that Ivory-billed woodpecker might be exist, so the environmental DNA stuff definitely quite worth it to try.
Well, if it's not there, you're not going to get a hit, right? Those primers aren't going to.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
So
I will mention it to her. Yeah.
That's pretty. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty low risk, low level stuff. I mean, it's.
no, just get the
yeah.
specific primers that we can, I mean, easily design in this age. Then we should just find a laboratory to try the PCR. So because we have to use a traditional technique, not the next generation sequencing. So the traditional technique to get the, I mean, some amplification, I mean, make lots of, not different, but lots of copies of the target region based on the primers for the Ivory-billed woodpecker DNA. Then we can sequence them. Then we can understand Ivory-billed woodpeckers exist or not. It's definitely, I mean, worth it. So this technique is gonna be probably cheaper than before. I mean, it's getting new stuff and getting cheaper and cheaper.
Well,
I can think of 3 locations. Rachel, her birds are centered around a very small stream. We've got cameras up there. We're trying to figure where they would fly exactly. But Rachel's are centered around a small stream. The ones that Project Principalis have been looking at, they're centered around a little more of a complex system, a stream system. But maybe downstream, they'd be willing to take some samples. And then in the mid-2000s, Mike Collins had an encounter with birds that were right at a stream in the, what was the name of that place? Oh, gee, it's escaping me. But right next to a stream. They were down in the water, maybe drinking or something. So that's a gap of about 20 years, which might be interesting with comparison.
Well, and you know, if folks are continuing to monitor these areas, for God's sake, I mean, if there's any feathers, you know,
Oh, we're looking.
these birds got to molt. You know, I mean, they molt every year.
Although I've read that down south, feathers get eaten quickly. They
Well,
will last. Yeah.
yeah, okay, but you know, I mean, if you're walking around all the time, there should be feathers.
Right.
And certainly, and I don't want to speak for people that you know that are doing work, but if somebody like Rachel is, you know, obviously looking at something that looks like a nest cavity, you know, you got to get sticky tape or something up there and get samples for that DNA. You know, I mean,
Well, she hasn't found it. She hasn't found a nest quite yet.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
she's trying to triangulate birds and such. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Whatever it is. I mean, if there's any biological material from those things, then you know. Then the next question, Utku, is who's going to pay for this?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, but it's not gonna take that much money, so
No, it shouldn't. Yeah. Yeah.
it
Maybe we
shouldn't be. I mean,
yeah.
it's gonna be really. Three of us probably can do something when we get together and put some little money. Then we can try to get something, maybe 10 samples, maybe 20 samples. It shouldn't be that much money.
So
Well, I'd be willing to send them to somebody. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Utku, you've got colleagues working on what are they doing with environmental DNA there in Turkey?
Oh, they are trying to make some phonistic research. They are gonna get different kind of DNA using environmental DNA technique, and they can understand I think they worked in one of the wetlands and tried to understand the phonistic elements for these wetlands in terms of birds and mammals.
So surveys without actually seeing the
right. I mean, you know, the people using the camera trap.
Yeah.
Now people using the environmental DNA to pick up I mean, try to trap the different how many different kind of species around there. So because we have gene bank available, we can make a blast. So we can get different kind of DNA sequences.
But what are some of the flaws in the technology where you get false positives?
Oh,
it's my job.
Right. I know. That's true. I never use the environmental DNA techniques. I just read it, some of them, and I listened to people. They said they are gonna get success, but I don't know how much success they got. But I saw a couple of different papers in good journals like, I mean, Nature, Science, and Scientific American. They are always talking about the environmental DNA to understand the phonistic elements in specific habitats.
Well, I understand that DNA and PCR are major technological advances, but I'm also aware that sometimes things are too specific and too sensitive.
Of course. I mean, of course, there are some. I believe this technique also has some negative stuff, but people using it, and I never used it. So I just read it, and I just try to make some comment based on these readings.
Well, I'm just glad that, you know, we reshot the woodpecker video, because this is something that we could do, I think. You know, so
yes, definitely. I mean,
do it,
John. If you can get some samples, we can try to find a place. I mean, maybe in United States, maybe out of United States, because you can just send the water samples to Turkey, and I can find somebody to pick up these samples, and we can try to make some collaboration. Then we can get some results, maybe, but I don't know.
Well, yeah, I can ask Project Principalis. I can ask Mike Collins. His was in the Pearl River system. He could probably go back to the same spot he saw them. And then Rachel, I think she'd be happy to do that, happy to collaborate. Yeah.
Because it's not the sort of thing where sometimes if people have birds on their property, they don't want somebody to come look. So this is very low, you know, it's low impact, low risk.
Well, I can make a connection between that person and my friend, and they can make some experiments. Then we can understand it's really exist or not. Well, we try to understand. I mean, we don't know. But it's an interesting question.
Oh, it's great. I'm glad it came up this way. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
right,
an interesting
exactly.
question. It worth to try, definitely, because people talking about this, and it's a very good technique to understand whether it still exists or not. I mean, using DNA stuff.
So let me ask as another naive question. We're talking about, I mean, I can understand looking for fish species and turtles and stuff like that in water, but
Mhm.
but how do we get to a bird like an ivory-bill in the water? Well, what's the DNA doing floating around in the water? I mean, it just it's in the air and it settles in the, like, even a duck. Okay, fine. They're swimming in the water. How how does that?
I have no idea. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Well, you know what I'm getting at. It's like,
Yes,
you know,
I have no idea.
you know.
They have to drink from the stream.
Well, okay, but okay, it's like taking a pee in the ocean, isn't it? I
Well,
mean,
Peter, how do other woodpeckers obtain water?
well, sure, they bathe and they drink water. They probably get a lot of water from their food. Birds that they have to drink, but they don't have to drink as much as mammals because of the way their kidneys are, and the whole thing. But but even so, let's say you have an ivory bill, it lands by the water, and it dips its beak in there for 3 seconds, and it flies off. How does that? I mean, that confers enough DNA into a lake that you can find it with environmental DNA. See, I just find it
Yeah,
fascinating. If it's true, I mean, I have no idea how that would even work.
yeah, I couldn't
Um,
tell you.
yeah,
Couldn't tell you.
yeah, yeah. It's fascinating.
Yeah,
But if your colleagues who say no, we can do it from water. I mean, maybe it counts for all the biota in the region.
yes,
There's
yeah.
yeah, there's waterways and stuff, and by checking that, you get a sample of everything around. Like you said, what do they call faunistic study?
Holistic, yeah, definitely. They
Yeah.
just try to understand the fauna element.
Mm.
So they try to find how many different species use that habitat using the environmental DNA stuff. So it is definitely, I mean, interesting tool to understand the these kind of questions. So we can try it.
Yeah, well, let's
Yeah,
try
it's
it.
easy enough.
If you
Easy
have a
enough to complete.
specific, I mean, specific geography spot, so we can definitely try with different samples. So the environmental DNA is definitely useful tool, but we have to be careful, definitely. So because there are lots of contamination stuff also.
Right, that's the other thing I was thinking about.
Mm.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, well,
But
Well,
it's,
maybe
it's a great question. It came up.
I'll ask Rachel first, because from what I've heard, her birds are the most
right.
concentrated in a small water area.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when you mentioned it. That's what I thought. So if she's actually got birds there, and then that's the best shot.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And any droppings. I mean, if she thinks that these are droppings from ivory bills, I mean, we could maybe try to do that too.
Yeah.
Or any feather, feathers that look like ivory bill feathers. If they're not too.
She was out there looking last time she was there with a friend. They were scouring for feathers.
Yeah,
Yeah, they didn't find any.
Mm.
yeah. Hmm. Fascinating. Well,
Hmm.
Okay.
well, that was good, and the audio was certainly better than last time.
Oh,
But
definitely. I mean, we don't have any issue. I don't know. I'm gonna check after this video, but
yeah,
I
great.
can take your last words, Peter.
Oh, my very last words, or just for
Not
today?
very last word, and
Oh,
last word for this video.
yeah. Uh, no, this is always so interesting. You could, the more you talk, somebody mentions something, and then you think of something else, and this is the way that things should be done. It's
Yeah, this investigation.
yeah, and I think it'll be cool because let's say we get some samples and we do them, and whether they find anything or not, then we can come on again and tell our audience how it all
Right.
went down. That's
CSI
interesting
for
stuff,
woodpeckers.
right?
Oh,
So
another thing,
what is the, yeah, the John? This is,
another thing
what's
I can
your last,
mention.
yeah.
Well, if things go right, we may be having a Mission Ivorybill Zoom that's revealing a lot of information that I have not been able to reveal yet. Good video. So I would say stay tuned on the Facebook page, Mission Ivorybill. I'm kind of negotiating with some very different egos, And also, the last thing I want to say is this guy in the middle. Now, this guy in the middle taught me so much of what I know
Oh,
to be
jeez.
able to sort of consult like this.
Well, that'll get you
True.
nowhere. Well, that's kind of you to say,
True.
John, but but
I know it's true.
you had the interest anyway, so
Okay,
And Utku is this guy. No,
right.
also has taught me quite a bit,
I
Yeah.
bet. Yeah.
as I have taught him. I mean,
Okay. Thank you so much.
It was
Thank you
good.
so
So
much
we'll
for
be
this
in
video.
touch
It's
again.
it's a
Yeah.
nice. I mean, it's a nice episode. It's way better than the before. And John, very thank you very much coming
Yes,
here.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Okay.
it.
All right. We'll be in touch. You let us know
Talk to you
about
soon.
Rachel, and we'll see what else we can do.
I
Cool.
will. I'll ask her this evening.
Great.
Okay. Okay. I'll see you.
All right.
I'll see you soon. Hopefully.
Okey-doke.
Take
All right.
care. Bye.
Good seeing you again.
Right. Bye.